Good afternoon and welcome to ADAC Answers Live, collaborative conversations for school leaders. I'm your host, Matt Maloney, a teacher and school leader for more than 15 years and now the Vice President of Marketing here at ADAC. In utopia, every student would have access to high quality learning. However, the reality is that students face various barriers that can hinder their access to learning each day at school. One of the most powerful ways to address these barriers and ensure that every student has a chance to succeed is by creating inclusive school environments. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll offer solutions and answer your questions with our national experts, Dr. Sandra Drummey and Kate McConnell. Sandra Drummey is a lifelong special education practitioner. She served as a teacher, vice principal, and principal. As an administrator, she established special education centers, and as the assistant superintendent for Catholic schools in the Diocese of Fall River, she oversaw the creation and implementation of a first-of-its-kind diocesan-wide special education program. She has degrees from Suffolk University, Boston College, including her doctorate from Boston College. And with more than 20 years of experience in special education, Kate McConnell has served as a special education advocate, a teacher, program evaluator, and developer. Her professional experience includes service as a public school special education teacher in 2 different districts. And she's also served as the director for inclusive education at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Academy in Chicago, and then at the Archdiocese of Chicago. She holds degrees from Townsend University, Loyola Chicago, and DePaul. So Kate and Sandy, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you here today and to have a great conversation.
Thank you, Matt. Happy to be here.
So just a couple of housekeeping. Please use the chat, throw in questions throughout as we're talking. We want to hear from you. Comments, questions are always welcome. And as I said, as we began, I'm recording this session so that we'll be able to share this with you all and others who couldn't attend live today. So I just want to start by thanking one of our attendees, Joy. She's the Student Success Team Coordinator at Foothill Christian School in Glendora, California. Joy submitted an awesome question that's really going to help shape our conversation today. And she asked, what are the key differences between inclusion and belonging in a school community and on a school campus? And I think this is just a great way to start. So Sandy, can you give us your thoughts on inclusion versus belonging in our schools?
Happy to do so, Matt. Thank you. Enjoy. Thank you. As I agree with Matt, that is a fantastic question. And Kate and Matt and I pondered about it quite a bit. And so this is the best answer we came up with, is that when we think of inclusion, we think of creating an environment where people are welcome to participate equally and have equal access, right? But when we think of belonging, it's a little more personal. I find that people can be included in a group, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they feel they belong, okay? And so we want to create environments where we include them, but also make them feel that they are a valued member of this group. And I'm going to give you a real life example. Just recently, I had the pleasure of visiting an integrated special education program in a school where these students are learning both at their instructional and independent levels, right? But they're also pulled out for speech and OT, sensory, and reading instruction. And I had an opportunity to interview a group of the students. And I asked them, what do you like most about your school? And one student said, I love the school because my teachers have faith in me, and therefore I have faith in myself. Another student said, I love the school because I get to be who I really am, because I learn differently. That is a sense, that said to me, these students really feel like they belong, they're included, their program has been set up so that they meet success, but they have a sense of belonging. And so that's the best, that's really, that to me, when I thought of you, Joy, when I heard those responses from the students, so thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, Sandy. Kate, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I just want to say, Joy, also, and I think a lot of us think about this, but such a great question. And it's easy to say that we include students, or it's easy to say all students belong. But there's a difference, like what Sandy just shared. Those students definitely feel like they belong. But I would add that the most critical piece to creating a culture of belonging, because it doesn't happen accidentally, it comes from the leadership. The principal needs to be intentional about creating a culture of belonging where students on all ends of the academic and the social emotional learning spectrums feel that not only are they an important part of the school community, but so are their classmates. Everyone belongs. Um, to build a culture of belonging, just to give a little bit of practical advice, the number one piece of advice I could give to school leaders is to ensure that everyone, especially every single student, is welcomed as they cross the threshold into the school and as they cross the threshold into their classroom. It has such a large impact on students feeling welcome. And the research shows that mental health issues are increasing, but when students have at least one person they connect to, that it prevents those issues from getting worse. And this is a great way of building that culture of belonging. Now, when I have shared this with school principals and teachers, there's 5 million things that we have to do, right? And people can often feel like, oh, I've got so many things already to do. But what I would say back to that is just 5 years ago, not only did we welcome every single person into the class, we took their temperature, asked them if they had a cough, asked them if they had a sore throat or anyone in their household. We can figure it out. And um, every time I've taught this, once schools have started it, they don't go back. It makes such a big difference.
Thank you so much, Kate. Yeah, relationships and building those relationships is such a huge part. And so as we strive for belonging, um, let's shift our conversation of what are those inclusive education practices that we can implement that will help us hopefully lead to inclusion and belonging at our schools. And so, Sandy, a lot of what we do at ADAC when we talk about this is we think of things through the lens of MTSS. And MTSS, I'm sure everyone has heard the initials, and hopefully you know what they mean by now. But Sandy, can you start out by giving us a brief summary of MTSS and the key components of it?
I'll be happy to, Matt. So MTSS is the acronym for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. And this framework actually came out of the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015. And pretty much, in a nutshell, it provides equitable access and addresses the needs of the whole child. And I love this about it because we should be looking at the whole child when we educate them, right? So it's academically, behaviorally, socially, and emotionally. And what we do a lot of work in schools with MTSS to help them build this system where we provide tiers of support. And as we know, we talk about the first tier of support, the universal instruction that students are receiving in their classrooms. Not all students can succeed or will succeed. Research shows that maybe 80% of those students can succeed. So therefore, we have to bring in targeted support. So we refer to those as tier 2, where we may be offering some small group instruction or maybe some tutoring. Then if we see students don't make the progress we'd like to see in tier 2, we might make those supports a little more intensive. So we refer to those as tier 3 supports. And that may be, pull out to do some extra time with reading or math, whatever it may be. The beauty of MTSS is that it differentiates supports based on the individual needs of the students. And we're constantly monitoring this, which I absolutely love about this program. I personally call it the safety net. No student is going to fall between the cracks, or the net in this case. We are monitoring these students based on the data that we are collecting from classroom teachers, from assessments. But for it to be successful, it has to be a school-wide approach. Everyone needs to buy in, including parents, so that we can really build up a system for success with students. Kate,
Yes, thanks, Sandy. And to piggyback off what Sandy is saying, it's a framework for supporting all students and to make sure all students are learning. And I think many teachers and many schools are already intuitively, to some degree, implementing a type of MTSS. The idea behind it is to determine instruction and the intensity of that instruction based on observable data. And I think as practicing educators, we're always looking to see, are the students getting it? Are they learning? And if they're not, what can I do differently? And that's the basis of MTSS. It works best, of course, when it's a school-wide approach, like Sandy said, and you have buy-in from all stakeholders. Um, and I would also add that it can be used to not just support the students who are in that 20% who might not be getting that tier one, that level instruction, but maybe are learning it and beyond. So it's a way to meet the needs of students on all ends of the spectrum to make sure that students are learning, because all students come with strengths and challenges, but the number one thing we want is to make sure that they're learning and that we have good data to look at to see where did they start. And so that's where universal screeners come in, and where do we want them to go. And we want all of our students learning. Maybe they won't be learning at the same pace or the same exact material, but we want them learning. And it also can be used and is used to determine if maybe a student needs to be referred for an evaluation. Because yes, teachers are miracle workers, but students who, especially students who have special needs, often need targeted, intentional, specific support. And this MTSS model is proactive so that we can catch students, like Sandy said, before they fall through the cracks, and refer them to the public school district, whether it's a public school student, private school student, to determine if maybe they're eligible for special education and additional support.
Excellent. Thanks, Kate. Sandy, could you clarify a little bit about the tiers? I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion. I know when I was a principal and implementing MTSS, there was always the confusion about, oh, so this student is in tier one and we're placing students in tiers, when really it's the interventions that are tiered. So can you explain that a little better?
Yes, that's an excellent point, man. And we hear that a lot. And I think that's just the language that has developed around this. So yes, students are not placed in tiers. And what I love about this is that it's constantly evolving for these students. And that's why it's so important, like Kate said, to continue to watch the data. Because as a principal, when I first got my first year as principal, some of my students were put into our response intervention program, and they were there for 3 or 4 months. And when I went to ask how are they doing, no one can tell me. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Let's take a look at the data. Let's see what kind of progress we made so we can kind of, shake things up a little bit. So yes, that's the important part of the tiers. So we want to continue to have regular meetings with our student support team, because every MTSS program should have a really good, strong, committed student support team. Regular monthly meetings, or whatever you decide to meet, to look at the data, see the process, see the progress, and what can we change for the students? Sometimes what I love about TMTSS too, there are many things I do, but we are finding that sometimes with students, there's just some gaps. There are learning gaps, or there's some behavioral issues going on that we really need to kind of target, right? This provides us time to do so. But then coming back within a month or 6 weeks to say, okay, where are we at? And what do we have to do? Sometimes the students, those gaps will close. The intervention may no longer be needed. Sometimes we find the gap isn't closed. And like Kate said, it was perfect. We continue to monitor these students, and at some point the conversation may be different. It may see there's a barrier here that's preventing the student from learning. Maybe we need to discuss referral. The beauty about MTSS and collecting all this data, all this progress monitoring as we go along, if we decide for referral, we have all of this evidence to bring to the table to say, we think there may be something going on here. And so we like to do a sped eval.
Yes.
That's helpful.
And if I could just piggyback off of what you're saying, Sandy, and I think another important point to remember that MTSS is not a model to prove somebody needs special education. The, the instruction is tiered to help students get to the next level. And the goal is always to get the student back to tier 1 with the least amount of supports. So the instruction is fluid. If a child is getting tier 2 instruction, that doesn't mean like it used to mean in the 1970s, for those of you who might remember, that if you got into a special education classroom, you were there and you stayed there forever. This is a fluid model to make sure students are continuing to learn.
Thanks so much, Kate. Um, just two more points I want to make about MTSS. The flexibility, we kept hearing about flexibility because it works for all learners. And as diverse as our learners are in our schools, the types of schools represented just on this call are so diverse, whether it be public schools, charter schools, private schools, faith-based, large, small, have resources, under-resourced. MTSS is flexible to work in any environment. It's not a cookie cutter program that you have to have X, Y, and Z in order for it to work. It can work anywhere. And it makes everyone part of making sure all kids learn. So if a child needs extra tiered support, that's not just the responsibility of the learning support team, and then we defer the students out of the general ed classroom to someone else. No. It's that everyone, especially the classroom teacher, is playing an integral role in that student's learning. And so that's what I love, because it's a community approach, and the more people that you can get involved, the lighter the lift. Many hands make light work. This is difficult work. This is amazing work that you all do each and every day, but galvanizing your team will make it even better. And so with that, let's transition over and focus on that tier 1 instruction, that universal ground level classroom instruction that we like to call universal design for learning. So Kate, can you talk a little bit about UDL and its principles, and maybe a little bit how that is different than what we've heard for many years now on differentiated instruction? How does UDL versus differentiated instruction, how do they compare?
So, well, I would say UDL is proactive. So you're going in with the idea that you're differentiating already, but you're offering choice. So you're not differentiating and providing A to student A and B to student B. Everyone has a choice basically of A, B, and C. And it's a teaching framework where the environment is designed to promote multiple means of engagement, of student engagement, representation of the material, and action and expression. So it's a way of thinking about teaching and learning that helps give all students an equal opportunity to succeed. We all come into our different spaces with different strengths and challenges, right? And we can all be raised in the same family, go through the same schooling, and somebody graduates and becomes, an engineer, someone else becomes a teacher. We all come with different strengths and challenges. So it's a way to offer flexibility in the ways students access material, engage with it, and show what they know, and to shine in what they know. And it recognizes that if students can't access information, then they can't learn it. So it's a way of creating an environment so that all students can access it. And it's a way of thinking about teaching and learning that help give all students an equal opportunity to succeed. It offers flexibility in the way students access the material, etc. It has to be intentional. So it's not necessarily something that you can just quickly do. It has to be like a group effort, as Sandy was saying about MTSS. It takes several people working on it, but once you start doing it, again, it's like that threshold greeting. You won't go back because it's proactive. It's not going to solve every issue, right? but it's a great way of widening that safety net. And I know Sandy has her, arms in this every day and probably can provide some helpful examples of how to really implement it.
Be happy to, Kate. Thanks. When I think of learner variability, as Kate said, all our learners are different, and they're all going to learn differently, right? And so there's no one way to represent our instruction. One size doesn't fit all. So we have to think about planning for all students when we plan under UDL. So when I think of representation, I think, how do we represent the content we're trying to teach on any given day? I think of the example of, trying to teach the Civil War. And maybe not all students in my classroom could access that text. It may be too difficult for them. So how can I plan so that all students would be able to learn? The learning goal is learning about the Civil War. So I may offer a video. I may offer a book on tape. If I have a student that may have a processing delay, I may be able to change the rate of speech on that audio book so that that student can keep up with the listening. I may offer a PowerPoint and just highlight the key components of that lesson that I want them to understand. So it's thinking with everyone in mind and planning for that. When I do professional development around UDL for Learning, I use this little fun comic, and I want to share with all of you. It's a picture of students trying to get into a school after a pretty bad snowstorm. And there's a set of steps going up to the school door, and on the other side, there's a ramp. And the custodian is shoveling the steps while the students are all standing there, and there's a student in a wheelchair. And the student in the wheelchair asks the custodian, "Why don't you shovel the ramp first?" And the custodian answers, "I will once I finish the steps." The student says, "But if you do the ramp first, we can all get into the building. We can all access and start to learn." And that's just the way we want to think about that, right? Like, how are we going to work for the entire class and plan accordingly?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sandy. I have a quick announcement before we get to some more questions. If you have any questions, please put that to the chat. We really want to hear from you. But before we transition to that, I just want to remind everyone that today's session is being recorded and it will be posted on the ADAC website, www.theadac.com, along with other resources like our blog. And we aim for this to be a collaborative conversation because this is precisely our approach at ADAC to professional learning. Our mission is to empower you as pre-K to 12 educators to meet the learning needs of all students through customized professional development and coaching services. We're your collaborative thought partner. We're committed to your student success, and we are your tailored solution. We listen, we care, we customize here at ADAC. And that's why we love MTSS. That's why we love UDL. You've heard a million times for us to say, oh, it's customizable, it's flexible, it's for everybody. Well, that's because we feel like it fits. It fits so well everywhere. So no questions in the chat, but there were a few more questions that came in the registration. And the first one, Sandy, if you want to take a stab at it, it's someone asked, what type of programming does ADAC offer for schools that serve students with special needs? So we offer PD on all these things, but why don't you talk a little bit about the program evaluation, because we found that to be super helpful as well, Sandy.
Yes, thank you. That's another great question. And, Matt hit the nail on the head earlier. We try to differentiate for the schools we work with like we differentiate for our students. So every school is different. Every school is in a different place in regard to their student populations, and resources, what have you. So what we like to do in the beginning is come in and do a program eval. And there we find that schools have some great programs and systems and structures in place. We like to identify those and then make recommendations as to how to strengthen those programs, especially working for students who may be on IEPs or accommodation plans. I think that has become such a great tool for for the school principals, because they get to see a bird's eye view and say, oh, wow, we are doing some really good things here. But let's take a look about how we can dovetail some of these with other resources we have within the school. So I would recommend that we stop there. And some schools may say, you know, we just went through reaccreditation and we have some goals we have to meet. Can you come in, work with us on implementing MTSS, in-person coaching? We offer some online courses for inclusion. So I would say getting to know you personally, getting to know your community, both your teachers and your students, will help us serve you best. That would be my best answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy.
Well,
Kate, we just had a question coming in the chat. What are some strategies that you might recommend to collaborate with families to support inclusion?
That's a really great question. And it is, you have to be very careful with this. So if we're talking about inclusion with regards to, we are going to be including students with who are diverse learners, it can be a hot button issue, especially in private schools. It also can still be a hot button issue in public schools where a child who maybe is struggling, families are feeling like those struggles are getting in the way of their children learning. I think you have to be intentional about sharing information regarding how including children with special needs increases the learning of general education students. So neurotypical students benefit from the inclusion of students with learning needs, students with learning needs, whether it's social emotional learning needs or academic learning needs. They perform better, they do better also, and they are going to be members of our community, regardless if you're in a private school, public school. So I think you have to be very intentional about talking about including students. What I like to say when I'm helping schools with this and communicating with families is that everyone needs a little help along the way. That's all we're doing. We're not labeling anyone. We're not saying you're special education, you're going to be special education forever, but we're going to meet the students where they are when they are struggling to get them to the next level, just like we're going to do for your child. So I think you have to be really open that it's going to, you know, that there are challenges, but that this is to benefit everyone. I also think conversation protocols are very helpful in having these difficult conversations, and it's really important to think of a protocol to bring for you and your team to have these conversations and have them in person and not over email.
Thanks so much, Kate. And Sandy, another question that came in, this one was from Debbie in Texas. She put in her registration. I always wrestled with this. I know my teachers always did when I was a principal, and that is push-in services versus pull-out services for students who need those extra tiers of supports. What's better? What should we do for our kids who are struggling learning or have behavioral needs? Push in or push out?
oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Debbie from Texas. It's an awesome question. And I know this has come up many times in my career. I'm sure for many of you also. And when I read some research on it, it really is, it's a mix, you know. I could share what I've been reading, but there's a mix out there that, you know, there's the combination may work, or sometimes. So I think the bottom line is each has their benefits and their drawbacks, right? And I think if it's done well, I think pull out can be very beneficial for students that need it. My own son was diagnosed with dyslexia in second grade. He needed pull out in Wilson 5 days a week, and he did not feel labeled or stigmatized because the school did a fantastic job in making that learning center shine, to the point where students that didn't need support wanted to go to the learning center because it it was a safe place. So I think, when we look about it, it really has to be on an individualized basis. And what does the student need? That's at the end of the day, we have to do what's best and make decisions that are going to be best for the students. So I think getting back to Kate's point around family, it has to really be thought out in a very inclusive, belonging environment. Getting back to Joy's question, where students are going to get what they need, but not feel labeled if they're being pushed out. Sometimes even the push in can make them feel that way if they're being, taken to the corner of the room and small desk and working with the teacher. Ideally, it would be awesome if we can have a teacher co-teaching with the special education teacher in all of our classrooms, but we're going to continue to pray on that. That would be the most ideal, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Excellent.
if I could just add to that, I agree with Sandy, and I know Matt, Sandy, and we were talking about pretty much every question that's being asked that we get, throughout the year with regards to special education. We could answer with, it depends. So there are, like Sandy said, there are positives and drawbacks to both. I've seen where pullout works really well. Like I taught Wilson Reading System. I saw it work really well. I did push in where it was more of a co-teacher model, and it worked really well because all the students looked to me as a resource, not just the students who are diverse learners. I've also seen pullout work terribly because data wasn't kept and there was no way to tell if learning was happening. I've also seen push in work terribly because maybe a teacher went in and just sat in the back and waited for students to come to them and no one felt comfortable. And then I think that circles back around to that MTSS component where decisions are made based on data. And that's what's going to determine if push in or pull out is going to be the right solution for that particular student.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's amazing how quickly 30 minutes flies by each and every time we do one of these sessions. So Sandy and Kate, thank you so much for being with us. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Just a couple of quick takeaways, and that is that I just felt just came to the surface in this conversation was intentionality, using data to track our progress and help us make decisions, and then getting some systems and structures in place. And something like MTSS has the flexibility to work in various settings, but it also galvanizes the community so that everybody is a part of it. And so again, thank you all for the good work you all are doing each and every day in your schools, with your teachers, with your students. You all are doing the hard work,